Ambassador Krevna of the Jaxiri Confederation dismissed the reports as exaggerations. His species prided themselves on analytical thinking, and the notion that hardened mercenaries would flee from mere humans seemed absurd. Humans were physically unimpressive by galactic standards. Average strength, average speed, average sensory capabilities. Their only notable trait was unusual endurance, hardly a decisive combat advantage against species with superior technology and natural weapons. The Thraxian incident has a simple explanation. He informed the Concordat Security Council. Pirates are superstitious. One coincidence becomes rumor, rumor becomes myth. Admiral Shiva Okafor of the Earth Defense Force remained silent during his dismissal. Her dark eyes revealed nothing as the alien diplomats debated human military capabilities. The skull emblem controversy had reached diplomatic channels faster than expected, and Concordat regulations required transparency from member species. 3 days after the council meeting, Krevna's shuttle docked at Proxima Station for refueling. The station hub buzzed with the usual mix of merchants, travelers, and contractors from 24 species. Krevna noticed several humans in standard station maintenance uniforms moving through the crowd, unremarkable except for their quiet efficiency. His security chief approached with uncharacteristic hesitation. "Ambassador, we've received a strange message. Station security reports a disturbance in the diplomatic quarter yesterday. The details are unusual." The security recording showed a Drex mercenary captain, a hulking reptilian with thermal vision and natural armor, backing against a wall, arms raised in surrender. Facing him stood a single human female in standard station attire, unarmed and physically dwarfed by her opponent. "What am I seeing?" Krevna demanded. According to station records, this human intercepted the Drex attempting to access diplomatic quarters. His security chief explained. The Drex carried military-grade weapons and scanning equipment. One unarmed human confronted an armed Drex. That contradicts basic survival instinct. The human identified herself as Second Lieutenant Maya Chen, station security liaison. The Drex immediately surrendered and requested confinement rather than facing her. When questioned, he refused explanation except to say, "She bears the mark of the Wraiths." Krevna magnified the image, noticing for the first time the small patch on the human's uniform sleeve, a faded skull insignia nearly invisible against the dark fabric. His curiosity piqued. Krevna accessed Concordat intelligence files on Lieutenant Chen. Her service record appeared oddly incomplete: 4 years of standard military service, followed by a 3-year gap labeled simply specialized training, then assignment to Proxima Station as a routine security officer. Nothing suggested special capabilities or commendations. That evening, Krevna found himself observing the lieutenant in the station's common area. She sat alone, reading from a primitive paper book, an unusual sight in the digital age. Nothing in her demeanor suggested danger. Yet when a group of boisterous Kelturi merchants accidentally knocked over her drink, the entire group fell silent upon seeing her face. They quickly apologized and retreated, their translator units struggling to convey their evident anxiety. As Krevna watched, Chen's gaze lifted directly to his observation post, her expression neutral but eyes alert. Though logically impossible from that distance, he could have sworn she nodded slightly in acknowledgement before returning to her book. The ambassador departed Proxima Station the next morning, filing an amended report to the Security Council. The final paragraph read simply, "Regarding human military capabilities, further investigation warranted. Recommend careful diplomatic approach until verification possible." Admiral Okafor received a copy of the report with a slight smile. The whispers were spreading exactly as planned. General Vrekthul paced the command deck of his flagship, mandibles clicking in agitation. The light from Helios 6's blue sun cast harsh shadows across his chitinous features. His subordinates maintained a careful distance. The general had already executed 3 officers for the morning's failures. "Explain again how 300 elite warriors failed to secure a mining outpost defended by a handful of humans," he demanded. Commander Zexlor stepped forward, visibly controlling his fear. The humans employed unconventional tactics, General. They avoided direct engagement, instead using the environment against our forces. Elaborate. They collapsed mining tunnels to separate our units. They redirected atmospheric processors to fill sectors with non-lethal but disorienting gas. They manipulated communication systems to feed false information. Zexlor hesitated. And they moved in ways our tactical systems couldn't predict. Vrechthal's secondary eyes narrowed. You speak of technological superiority. No, General. Their equipment appears standard or even primitive by our measures. It's their movement patterns, their coordination without detectable communications, their apparent ability to. Zexlor struggled to find the right words. To know where we would be before we arrived. The general dismissed the commander with a contemptuous gesture. Siraxian military doctrine emphasized overwhelming force and psychological domination. Retreat was unthinkable, especially against an objectively weaker species. Yet his most experienced units had broken formation and fled, describing the human defenders as ghosts and shadows. Night cycle aboard the flagship brought no solutions. Vrechthal reviewed combat recordings obsessively, noting how the humans seemed to anticipate each tactical adjustment. More disturbing were the moments when Siraxian soldiers reported seeing humans one moment, only to find empty corridors the next. Equipment malfunctions always occurred at critical junctures, yet post-operation diagnostics revealed no tampering. He activated the neural stimulants that allowed his species to function without sleep. The campaign would resume at dawn with his personal guard leading the assault. Failure meant disgrace before the Siraxian High Command, an outcome worse than death. The general sensed the intruder before seeing her, a subtle shift in the air currents of his private chamber. He reached for his sidearm, only to find it missing from its usual place. Looking for this, the human female sat in his command chair, her boots resting casually on his strategic display. She held his particle pistol with familiar ease, though she made no move to aim it. Vrechthal's translator implant rendered her words in perfect Siraxian formal dialect. More alarming than her presence was her appearance: standard mining colony coveralls, no visible armor or advanced technology, and no weapons beyond his own stolen sidearm. Her only distinctive feature was a small patch on her shoulder, showing a stylized skull. "The Void Wraiths," he whispered, mandibles trembling despite his iron discipline. The name had spread through mercenary channels across 3 sectors. Humans who fought like no others, who appeared and disappeared at will. She smiled, the expression somehow more threatening than any battle cry. "General, today's demonstration was a courtesy. We disabled your troops without inflicting permanent harm. We allowed your ships to retreat without capturing them." "Siraxians do not retreat," he hissed. "Your forces did," she replied calmly. "They recognize what you refuse to see. This engagement cannot be won through conventional means." She stood, placing his weapon on the table between them. "The mining colony falls under Protection Protocol 6 of the Concordat Charter. You have violated that protection once. There will not be a second violation. You threaten me in my own command chamber." The general's claws extended, a reflexive predatory response. "No, General." Her voice remained conversational. "I'm offering you a dignified withdrawal. Alternative outcomes would be messy for everyone involved." The silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. "Leave by morning," she said softly, "or next time I return, you won't wake up." When his security team finally responded to his call, they found the general alone, his quarters undisturbed. The ship's systems showed no unauthorized entry, no security breaches, no unexplained readings. By sunrise, the Siraxian fleet had broken orbit. General Vrechthal reported a strategic withdrawal due to unforeseen resource allocation priorities. He never spoke of the human visitor, but he never accepted another contract involving human settlements. Admiral Elena Santos stood at the viewport of Concordat headquarters, watching distant ships glide silently through the void. Behind her, Holographic displays showed real-time updates from Horizon Station. Normal operations, no disturbances, no sign of the Wraith team she had deployed or the Krell threat they awaited. The Security Council is growing impatient. "Admiral," said Director Vargas, her civilian liaison. "They want explanations, not more mysteries." Santos nodded without turning. "They'll have them. After Horizon. If your people succeed." "When they succeed," she corrected quietly. On Horizon Station, Commander Kenji Takeda moved through the hydroponics section in standard technician coveralls. His dark eyes scanned the room automatically, noting entry points, camera positions, and potential choke points. The civilians working around him paid no attention to yet another maintenance worker checking environmental systems. His comm unit vibrated against his wrist, a micro-pulse pattern rather than an audible signal. Akachi had detected unusual radiation signatures near the outer docking rings. The Krell had arrived earlier than expected. Takeda continued his work for exactly 7 more minutes before casually setting down his tools and walking toward the staff break room. Inside, 4 other technicians looked up briefly as he entered, then returned to their meals. "Visitors arriving early," he said conversationally. "Party preparations need adjustment." No one visibly reacted, but the atmosphere in the room shifted subtly. Specialist Rivera finished her coffee and left first. Sergeant Dalton followed 3 minutes later. The others dispersed at carefully timed intervals. Within 30 minutes, key systems throughout the station had been subtly modified. Environmental sensors recalibrated, security protocols adjusted, maintenance access routes reprogrammed. Nothing obvious enough to trigger alerts, just small changes that would compound into significant advantages once the Krell arrived. The first boarding party docked 3 hours later under the pretense of routine trade inspection. The Krell moved with military precision despite their civilian disguises, their scaled bodies towering over the human station personnel. They carried concealed weapons and scanning technology that would have been immediately detected had the normal security protocols remained active. Station Director Phillips met them in the main reception area, her professional smile revealing nothing of the warning she had received 20 minutes earlier from an anonymous message. She followed Commander Takeda's instructions precisely. Complete cooperation, no resistance, absolute calm. "Welcome to Horizon Station," she said pleasantly. "How can we assist the Krell Dominion today?" The Krell commander's inner eyelids flickered in surprise at being identified so immediately. "Routine inspection," he rumbled through his translator. "Your docking manifests showed irregularities." "Of course. My staff will provide complete access." Phillips maintained her smile. "Though I should mention our central database is undergoing scheduled maintenance. Some systems may behave unpredictably." The first irregularity occurred as the Krell inspection team entered the east residential quadrant. Their thermal imaging devices showed heat signatures in 3 separate apartments, but physical checks revealed empty rooms. Maintenance logs indicated recent ventilation system adjustments that could explain thermal residue, a plausible explanation that nonetheless left the Krell soldiers unsettled. In the research wing, 2 Krell scouts reported moving shadows in supposedly vacant laboratories. Security footage showed nothing unusual, yet both scouts, decorated veterans with impeccable records, insisted on what they had seen. Commander Vrax, leading the operation from the Krell vessel, received increasingly disturbing reports. Environmental suits reported momentary pressure fluctuations that engineering could not explain. Communication channels picked up fragments of conversations that station logs showed never occurred. Security teams found themselves taking wrong turns in corridors they had already mapped. "This station is compromised," his security chief insisted. "Something is manipulating our perception." "Humans do not possess such technology," Vrax dismissed, though uncertainty had begun to gnaw at him. That night, as he reviewed tactical updates in his private quarters, his datapad displayed a simple message that appeared and vanished before he could trace its source. "Leave now. Next time won't be bloodless." By morning, Vrax had ordered a full withdrawal, citing insufficient strategic value in his official report. Privately, he requested reassignment to any sector where contact with humans was minimal. The Wraith team never officially revealed themselves. As far as station records showed, they had never been there at all. The jungle moon of Karish Prime dripped with vibrant toxicity. Native flora secreted chemicals that corroded standard environmental suits within hours. The atmosphere contained particulates that fouled filtration systems and degraded optical sensors. Even the most advanced species in the Concordat required extensive protection to operate in this hostile environment. The Mvor had chosen their base wisely. Their chitinous exoskeletons naturally resisted the corrosive elements, giving them a significant advantage over would-be pursuers. Captain Maya Rodriguez led her Wraith team through the dense undergrowth, their movements silent despite the heavy moisture and clutching vegetation. The Allied command had given them simple orders: reconnaissance only, intelligence gathering, risk assessment. Rodriguez had different plans. Adaptation protocols initiated. She subvocalized into her nearly invisible comm unit. Around her, the 8 members of Wraith Team Echo adjusted the nanomish underlayer of their combat suits, allowing controlled exposure to the toxic environment. Decades of research into human adaptability had proven what the first explorers discovered. With carefully managed exposure, human physiology could acclimatize to almost any environment. It was painful. It was dangerous. It violated at least 6 Concordat health protocols. It also worked. Within 48 hours, Echo Team operated without helmets for short periods, their enhanced metabolisms processing the toxins just quickly enough to prevent permanent damage. The Mvor never considered this possibility. Their evolutionary path had optimized specialized adaptation rather than generalized flexibility. Movement at coordinates 227 to 889, whispered Specialist Jackson, his eyes enhanced not by technology, but by the ancient human adaptation to darkness. The team shifted position with practiced efficiency, surrounding a Mvor hunting party without disturbing so much as a leaf. Rodriguez studied the insectoid aliens through a gap in the vegetation. The intelligence reports were accurate. The Mvor were formidable predators, 2 meters tall with razor-edged limbs and compound eyes that detected the slightest movement. Their neural structure linked individuals within proximity, creating a distributed consciousness that made ambushing them nearly impossible. Nearly. Phase 1, Rodriguez ordered. For 3 days, the Wraiths shadowed Mvor patrols without engaging. They studied movement patterns, communication methods, patrol rotations. They identified the hierarchical structure of the hive, distinguishing warriors from workers, scouts from commanders. On the 4th day, they began the psychological campaign. The Mvor commander Tikt Savor returned from patrol to find the trophy rack in his quarters rearranged. The bleached skulls of previous conquests now forming a pattern that exactly matched the layout of his current base. Nothing was missing. Nothing was damaged. Just rearranged with impossible precision in a secured chamber. He reported the incident to no one. Such an inexplicable security breach would suggest weakness, and the Mvor collective mind punished weakness severely. 2 nights later, an entire security outpost fell silent. The recovery team found all guards unconscious but unharmed, positioned in a radial pattern with heads pointing toward center. In the exact center lay a small metal object, a primitive human timepiece, still ticking. Tikt Savor ordered doubled security and randomized patrol patterns. The collective mind hummed with uncharacteristic anxiety. The Mvor were hunters, not prey. Yet something hunted them now. The 5th night brought the most disturbing development. The commander awoke to find his personal guard standing perfectly still outside his quarters, unresponsive yet clearly alive. On the wall behind them, someone had drawn the now infamous human skull emblem using a bioluminescent compound harvested from local flora. When the paralytic agent wore off hours later, each guard reported the same experience: a shadow that moved like smoke, a momentary pressure at the base of their central nerve cluster, then nothing. They could have killed us. One guard clicked in the private frequency, shared only by the commander's inner circle. They chose not to. This realization proved more demoralizing than any direct attack. An enemy that could strike at will yet chose restraint was an enemy operating beyond their understanding of warfare. When Allied forces finally launched their coordinated assault, they found the MVOR positions already in disarray, defensive lines broken, command structure fragmented, and morale shattered by an enemy they never directly encountered. The only physical evidence left behind: small skull emblems carved into the living structures of the hive, marking paths of infiltration that should have been impossible. Admiral Santos reviewed the personnel files on her secure terminal, the soft blue light illuminating her office aboard the EDF Indomitable. The candidates represented a significant departure from standard protocol. Non-human applicants for Wraith training. The Concordat Security Council had not been informed of this development. Some would call it a violation of treaty agreements. Santos called it evolution. Her aide entered with fresh coffee, setting it beside a stack of diplomatic communications. The Zithraxi delegation has confirmed their arrival date. Their observers include 3 war masters and a nest progenitor. Santos nodded. And our demonstration team. Commander Chen has selected the participants. They're running final simulations now. On the training grounds at Olympus Base, deep within the Martian caverns, 30 humans moved through a series of increasingly complex scenarios. Each wore standard issue equipment, no specialized gear, no advanced technology, nothing that would suggest capabilities beyond normal human parameters. The observable exercises appeared straightforward: combat simulations, tactical problems, endurance tests. What the monitoring systems didn't record were the subtle mental conditioning techniques employed throughout. Psychological resilience training drawn from centuries of human warfare experience. Lieutenant Rashid completed the mountain navigation course in record time, his breathing controlled despite the thin atmosphere of the simulated Himalayan environment. The external observers noted his physical performance. They couldn't measure the mental discipline that allowed him to ignore pain, discomfort, and fear. The true power of the Wraith program. The Zithraxi will expect a technological advantage. Commander Chen informed her team during the evening briefing. They fundamentally misunderstand what makes the Wraiths effective. Our job is to maintain that misunderstanding while demonstrating just enough to secure their respect. Private Kumar raised a hand. Ma'am, if we're showcasing human capabilities, why conceal our actual methods? Chen smiled. Because uncertainty is more powerful than knowledge. Let them believe we possess technological advantages they haven't identified. The reality that our strength comes from millennia of adapting to Earth's brutal environmental conditions and our species' unique psychological capabilities would be both more reassuring and more terrifying. Across the solar system, commercial shipping lanes reported a 40% decrease in piracy incidents where human security teams were present, often before the presence of Wraith-trained personnel was publicly disclosed. Criminal syndicates avoided human-protected targets with increasing determination. The reputation alone had become a deterrent. In her Geneva office, Ambassador Lakshmi Patel dealt with the diplomatic complications of this growing legend. The Concordat's more militant species had begun requesting joint training operations, technology transfers, and defense pacts, specifically mentioning human special forces capabilities. We cannot meet all these requests, she told Admiral Santos during their weekly secure call. And refusing them creates its own diplomatic pressure. We don't need to meet them, Santos replied. We need to manage them. The Zithraxi demonstration is key. We show enough to maintain the mystique without revealing our actual limitations. And those limitations are significant, Patel noted. The Wraith teams are few in number. Training takes years. The psychological toll on operators is substantial. Which is precisely why reputation matters more than reality, Santos said. One Wraith team can defend an entire sector if potential adversaries believe engagement means facing the full capability we've allowed them to imagine. The strategy carried risks. Myths eventually collapsed under scrutiny. But if managed properly, the legend of the Wraiths could create space for humanity to establish itself in galactic society without the devastating conflicts that had nearly destroyed Earth multiple times throughout its history. The true power of the Wraith program wasn't what it could do, it was what others believed it could do. And belief, Admiral Santos had learned through decades of service, was often more powerful than any weapon. The Zithraxi observers stood impassively as freezing mountain winds howled around them. Their environmental suits hummed with power, maintaining optimal body temperature despite the blizzard. 20 meters ahead, Commander Sarah Chen and her team wore only lightweight thermal gear, their exposed faces reddened by the biting cold. "The final phase begins now," Chen announced through the translator. "Your objective is to track and locate our team as we navigate to the extraction point 15 kilometers north. You have full access to your scanning technology and mobility systems." The lead Zithraxi, War Master Texiv, tilted his elongated head. His species communicated through subtle biochemical signals in addition to vocalizations, making his actual reaction difficult for humans to interpret. The translator rendered his response in flat, emotionless standard. "Your team will freeze before reaching half that distance with such inadequate protection." Chen smiled. "We adapted to this environment long before we developed your level of technology, War Master. Cold is an old enemy of humanity. We know its weaknesses." She gave a simple hand signal, and her team disappeared into the swirling snow without further comment. The Zithraxi delegation activated their pursuit systems. Thermal imaging, motion tracking, even molecular trace detection capable of following individual scent signatures through virtually any environment. Their hovering mobility platforms rose silently, compensating automatically for the harsh weather conditions. For the first 3 kilometers, they tracked the humans easily. Then the signatures began to fragment. Thermal readings appeared in impossible locations. Motion sensors detected contradictory movement patterns. Molecular traces led in circles or disappeared completely. "They are employing countermeasures," observed Science Monitor Keziv, adjusting his instruments with growing frustration. "But we detect no technological signatures." The humans had split into smaller teams, utilizing the natural environment in ways the Zithraxi had not anticipated. They packed snow against their bodies to mask thermal signatures. They traversed frozen waterways to eliminate scent trails. They used the wind itself to carry false indicators of their presence. War Master Texiv deployed scout drones programmed with the most advanced pursuit algorithms in the Zithraxi military database. 6 hours later, only 2 drones returned, their data corrupted beyond recovery. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped to levels lethal to unprotected humans. The Zithraxi observers, comfortable in their advanced environmental suits, continued their pursuit with growing determination. Their cultural understanding of warfare centered on technological superiority. They could not accept being outmaneuvered by beings using primitive techniques. Near midnight, Science Monitor Keziv detected unusual vibrations in the ice beneath them. "Seismic activity." "No," Texiv replied, his biochemical indicators showing the first signs of genuine alarm. "Deliberate destabilization." The ice shelf cracked with precisely calculated force, not enough to endanger the Zithraxi observers, but sufficient to disable their mobility platforms and force them to proceed on foot. The humans had turned the environment itself into a weapon. By dawn, the Zithraxi delegation found themselves at the designated extraction point, exhausted despite their technological advantages. Commander Chen's team waited for them, looking weary but functional despite spending the night in conditions that should have been lethal. "How?" demanded Texiv, genuine curiosity overriding his professional detachment. "Your species evolved on a temperate world. These conditions should be beyond your tolerance." Chen removed her gloves, revealing chapped but functional hands. "Humans evolved on a planet with environments ranging from scorching deserts to frozen tundra. Our ancestors survived ice ages with nothing but animal skins and fire. This," she gestured to the brutal landscape around them, "is in our genetic memory." She offered him a thermos of steaming liquid. "We learned to adapt because we had no choice. Your species developed technology to avoid adaptation. Both approaches have merit, but in situations where technology fails." The War Master accepted the offering with newfound respect. The demonstration had achieved exactly what Admiral Santos intended, not to intimidate through superior force, but to introduce doubt about the limitations of humanity. The Zithraxi delegation departed Earth with formal diplomatic appreciation and private strategic reassessment. Their classified report contained a single recommendation: avoid direct conflict with human special operations units under any circumstances. Commander Darius Reeb drifted silently through the maintenance shaft of the Krull dreadnought Inevitable Dominance. His presence aboard the enemy flagship violated 17 different sections of the Concordat Charter. Technically, this was an act of war. Politically, it was a desperate gamble to prevent one. The Wraith operative navigated the ship's circulatory system with practiced precision. Intelligence provided by Concordat sources had proven remarkably accurate. The Krull vessels maintained standardized designs across their fleet, allowing Reed to move through the darkness without active sensors that might reveal his position. 6 decks below, Lieutenant Sophia Rise employed a different approach. Dressed in maintenance coveralls appropriated from a storage bay, she moved through crowded corridors with the confident stride of someone exactly where they belonged. The Krell, like most hierarchical species, rarely questioned those who projected authority while performing menial tasks. Reed's comm unit vibrated against his skull, a bone conduction signal nearly impossible to detect with standard scanning technology. Captain Wagner's team had successfully compromised the fleet's secondary communication array. Phase 2 could now begin. Throughout the massive invasion fleet, small anomalies began to accumulate. Navigation coordinates shifted by fractions of a degree, causing ships to correct course more frequently than normal. Environmental systems in officers' quarters cycled unpredictably, disrupting sleep patterns. Security protocols initiated random scans that found nothing but consumed processing power and crew attention. None of these issues appeared serious in isolation. Together, they created a spreading sense of unease, the psychological foundation for what would follow. On the command bridge of the support vessel Dominant Will, Fleet Commander Zex Kiloth reviewed tactical projections for the upcoming assault on Earth. The human homeworld possessed significant defensive capabilities, but nothing that could withstand the combined firepower of his armada. The operation should require minimal casualties. The Krell Dominion would finally eliminate the growing human threat to their expansion plans. "Commander," his second reported, mandibles twitching with uncharacteristic agitation. "We've lost contact with security teams on decks 7 through 12. Zex Kiloth turned his primary eye cluster toward the officer. "System malfunction." "No, Commander." Teams responded normally, then ceased communication simultaneously. Internal sensors show no life signs in those sectors. "Impossible. Deploy reserve units to investigate." The reserve units reported similar findings: empty corridors where fully armed security teams should have been stationed. No signs of struggle. No weapon discharges. No indications of how hundreds of trained warriors could simply vanish. Reports from other vessels revealed similar incidents occurring across the fleet. Security teams disappeared. Critical systems experienced unexplained fluctuations. Command officers reported unusual sounds in private quarters, though surveillance recordings showed nothing. In his private chamber aboard the flagship, Admiral Vex Koroth awoke from chemically assisted sleep to find his personal guard missing from their posts. On his tactical display glowed a message that hadn't been there when he retired. "Your fleet has been compromised. Your security forces have been neutralized without casualties. Your command structure has been mapped and targeted. You have violated Concordat territorial boundaries. This is your only warning." The message vanished before he could document it, leaving no trace in the system logs. When his security chief arrived, breathless with disturbing reports from throughout the fleet, the admiral made a decision that would alter his standing in Krell military history. He ordered a full strategic withdrawal. The humans have deployed unconventional countermeasures, he informed the Krell High Command. Continuing the operation under current conditions presents unacceptable strategic risks. He never mentioned the items his staff discovered in his private quarters, the classified attack plans gone missing, replaced with detailed analyses of the fleet's defensive vulnerabilities. The message was clear. The humans could have done far worse than psychological warfare. For the first time in recorded history, a Krell invasion force retreated without engaging the enemy. Admiral Vexkoroth requested reassignment to the distant outer colonies, far from any sector where he might encounter humans again. The Wraith teams extracted as silently as they had infiltrated. Not a single shot had been fired. The observation gallery overlooking Training Facility 7 fell silent as the exercise unfolded below. 12 diplomatic representatives from the most powerful species in the Concordat watched with expressions ranging from disbelief to reluctant admiration. Admiral Santos stood beside Ambassador Patel, both women maintaining neutral expressions despite the significance of this moment. For the first time, the veil of secrecy surrounding the Wraith program had been partially lifted. The risk was calculated. The truth, properly presented, could be more powerful than the mystery. Below, 20 human candidates endured the final phase of Wraith selection. They had been running for 72 hours with minimal sustenance and no sleep. Their bodies showed signs of extreme fatigue. Muscle tremors, coordination loss, cognitive impairment. Yet they continued. They appear to be deteriorating, observed the Zithraxi representative. Their performance metrics are declining significantly. Yes, Admiral Santos acknowledged. Human physiology has clear limitations. We cannot match the strength of the Siraxians or the sensory capabilities of the Mvor. We tire. We break. We fail. Then how? Began the Krell observer, his mandibles clicking in confusion. Watch, Santos said simply. The exercise parameters shifted. Instructors introduced a simulated civilian casualty scenario. Despite their exhaustion, the candidates immediately reorganized, establishing security perimeters and medical triage with practiced precision. Their movements remained impaired, but their decision-making showed remarkable clarity. Cognitive resilience under duress, explained Dr. Sharif, the program's chief psychologist. Humans evolved as persistence predators and cooperative survivors. Our nervous systems developed specialized adaptations to maintain function even as physical systems deteriorate. In the simulation, one team encountered an ethical dilemma, a choice between mission objectives and civilian safety. The observers watched intently as the candidates deliberated, ultimately prioritizing non-combatant protection despite the tactical disadvantage. Note this moment, Santos said quietly. The candidates know this is a simulation. They know choosing mission priority would likely improve their selection chances, yet they choose the ethical path at personal cost. Ambassador Patel stepped forward. Distinguished representatives, you have heard stories about our Wraith program. Many believe we possess superior technology or biological enhancements. The truth is both simpler and more complex. What you observe is the product of human evolution on a punishing world and thousands of years of warfare, a history we do not celebrate but cannot escape. The representatives exchanged glances as understanding dawned. The humans hadn't developed some secret advantage. They had simply harnessed capabilities born from their uniquely challenging evolutionary path. The candidates succeed not because they avoid fear, pain, or ethical complexity, continued Dr. Sharif. They succeed because they function effectively despite these factors. We select for resilience, adaptability, and ethical judgment under extreme conditions. The Siraxian representative, General Krav Tuluk, broke the silence. Your reputation exceeds your capabilities, yet you deliberately fostered those exaggerated perceptions. Admiral Santos nodded. The most effective weapon is one you never need to fire. Humanity learned through centuries of devastating conflicts that perception shapes reality. Our Wraith program's greatest asset isn't what it can do, It's what potential adversaries believe it can do. The observation concluded with a demonstration few of the representatives had anticipated: the ethical reintegration assessment. Candidates underwent extensive psychological evaluation, focusing not on their tactical performance, but on their moral reasoning, empathy, and psychological health. We monitor for concerning psychological patterns after each operation, Dr. Sheriff explained. Operators who show signs of moral disengagement or excessive aggression are immediately removed from active service and provided rehabilitation. This concerns you more than combat effectiveness?" asked the MVOR representative, clearly struggling with the concept. "It concerns us precisely because of combat effectiveness," Santos replied. "An operator capable of the infiltrations you've witnessed, but lacking ethical constraints, would be the most dangerous weapon imaginable. The psychological evaluation is our most important safeguard." As the delegation departed, the Zithraxi representative lingered briefly. "Your species confounds prediction," he told Santos. "You cultivate a reputation for being dangerous while implementing systems specifically to limit that danger." Santos smiled. "The most human thing about us, Ambassador, is our contradictions.